Yeah, it's actually an award-winning student. Media.
Actually, no, long.
All right, so let me get started. I just need a little video clip from my website. It will take me about 10 minutes. So in the first 10 minutes, please ask all the easy questions and keep the tough questions for later. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about risk and return. Okay. This is chapter 7. Okay, so first of all, what is your impression about the relationship between risk and return? What's the association between risk and return?
Usually the higher the risk, the higher the return.
Yes. Let's take a look at some empirical evidence here. In chapter 7, if you look at page 157, 157. Okay, if you look at the top of the page, well, it's an interesting picture because the question is, if you had invested $1 at the beginning of the 20th century, in 1900, if you had invested $1 back then, the question is, how much would it have been by 2006? If you invested $1 for over 100 years. So if you had invested in common stock in 1900, by 2006, that $1 would have been how much? $14,000 approximately. Right? If you had invested in bonds, that $1 would have been $242. If you had invested in T-bills, it would have been $71. All right? Over a long period of time, over 100 years. Okay. Now you may say, well, this is not realistic because it's such a long time, and $1 today is obviously not the same as $1 100 years ago. So what you have to do is you have to adjust for inflation. Okay, let's take a look at the second picture, second graph. This is when you adjust for inflation. If you adjust for inflation, then the return that you would get from your common stock investment would have been only 582. But remember, you invested $1 only, and it would have been $582 adjusted for inflation. So it would have been $9.85 for bonds and $2.88 for T-bills. So the return would have been highest for common stock, second highest for bonds, and the lowest for T-bills. Okay. So what am I trying to explain here? If you look at these three securities, common stock, bonds, and T-bills, which is the most risky? Common stock. Which is the least risky? Okay. So what does it tell you about risk and return? Yes. The riskier the security, the higher return you get from the security. Right? So this is empirical evidence over a very long time, over 100 years. Okay. So we look at this over time, over a long time. Now let's take a look at this geographically. Let's take a look at geographical variation. Look at page 161. Okay. You're going to see this graph. You see this expression, risk premium. Have you heard this expression, risk premium? What does it mean? Anyone heard this expression? What is the risk premium? Anyone with a background in finance? Have you heard this? No? Okay. The risk premium is the return that you get. Let me write down. It's the rate of return. It's the rate of return above and beyond the risk-free rate. So, for example, if the risk-free rate is 5%, right, and you get 10% in return from your stock investment, then the risk premium would be 10 minus 5. It would be 5% over. That's what we call a risk premium. All right, let's take a look at this picture here. You see the risk premium in different countries, right? This is over a long period of time, 1900 to 2008. You can see which countries offer the highest returns. You see the top 3, top 4 there: Italy, Japan, France, Germany. Okay, these are the top 4 countries here. What do they have in common? If you look at these countries, the top 3, top 4 countries, do you see anything in common? Why are they offering such high returns? Historically. Anything happened in these countries in the 20th century? Yeah, I think Italy lost the war, World War II. Japan already was devastated by the nuclear bombs. France was actually a winner, but remember, France was occupied by the Germans, so technically they won the war, but the country was devastated. And Germany obviously lost the war, so these countries that were severely devastated by World War II. Okay? Now, let's take a look at page 167. This time we look at the standard deviation of returns. This is a measure of risk, right? So which investing in which countries would have been most risky? Look at the top 4 right there: Germany, Italy, Japan, Norway, France. Does it sound familiar? Yeah, the top 3, top 4 are the same countries, right? Germany, Italy, France, Japan. What does it tell you? Again, the relationship between risk and return. The higher the risk. Right. And this is true whether you look at this over time or whether you look at this geographically. All right. So risk and return has a very clear relationship there. So in this chapter, we're going to talk about the relationship between risk and return. Let me explain that this is not just for economics and finance, because it has a lot of social applications as well. Can you give me an example of like a social example in which there is a trade-off between risk and return? Can you think of anything? Not financially, but socially. Think about a situation that you may have to take more risk in order to get a higher return. Not in the financial sense, but you know.
Maybe with a job, like moving to a different state to take a job.
Yeah.
And leaving your family and friends.
Right. Because you may have a better career opportunity, but then you have to leave behind so many people that you love. So yeah.
Starting your business?
Yes, although it's kind of related. It's a financially related example. You have a more like socially related example. school student and you want to go to college.
This is very social, but if you go out on a blind date, you could meet the spouse of your dreams. I don't know.
Yeah, actually.
Be married for 40 years and more.
Right. You take a lot of risk by going on a blind date because you don't know who you're going to meet, but then you may end up meeting someone very, wonderful, and you may be very happy later on. Yes. Or if you are a high school student, well, you could go to average school, right? It doesn't cost you that much, or you could go to an Ivy League school, which would cost you how much does it cost to go to an Ivy League school these days? Does anyone know?
Well, I think it's free with scholarships.
That's true. But what is the sticker price? What is the sticker price? Does anyone know?
Around 50,000.
Yeah, I think you're right. A friend of mine, a colleague of mine, has a son going to UPenn. $50,000. It's approximately.
That's why I didn't go there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
And undergrad.
Yeah. So of course, you go to an Ivy League school, you end up, maybe spending a lot of money, and because it's very competitive, academically, you may not graduate. You run a lot of risk there. But of course, if you get a degree from an Ivy League school, when you look for a job, it'll be relatively easy for you to land a good job, right? So you take a lot of risk, but then you get a high return as well. Also, a blinded example is a great example. Think about, if you're a guy and you want to pursue an attractive lady, you know that it's risky because she probably has a lot of followers. Trying to go out with her. So by pursuing an attractive lady, you take the risk of getting rejected because you are probably one of many options that she has, right? But then because she's attractive, so she, in terms of return, it's higher. So that's, just want to emphasize that this concept is not limited only to economics and finance because it has very broad applications even in social studies. All right, so in finance, when you talk about risk, I think you understand the concept of risk, but how do you measure risk? Quantitatively, mathematically, how do you define risk? When you describe something as risky, what exactly do you mean? Like when you make an investment and you characterize the investment as risky, what exactly do you mean?
Compared to other options, like stocks, different stocks.
Okay.
Like if it's a newer company versus an older, more established company who's had consecutive returns.
Okay.
Like that.
It's something negative that may happen.
All right, very good.
They said there's more deviation.
Very good. Right. Basically, it comes to uncertainty, unpredictability. When you think about risk, when something is uncertain or something is unpredictable, you describe it as risky. So when you make a risky investment, basically you're saying that the outcome is uncertain. It's uncertain. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. Statistically, how do you measure uncertainty? Yes, variance are, if you take the square root of the variance, you get standard deviation. Okay? You have taken a class in statistics, right? So you're familiar with standard deviation. Right, so when you invest in a stock, and the stock has a lot of variation, if you look at the stock price, and if you see a lot of volatility, a lot of variation, you can describe the stock as risky. On the other hand, if you have a stock with a stable pattern of returns, then it would be considered not so risky, relatively stable stock. Okay. So standard deviation or variance. This is a measure of risk. All right, the next concept is we're going to talk about portfolio theory. This theory was invented in 1953. The man who came up with this theory, his name is Harry Markowitz. Well, believe it or not, he's still around. He's still around, even though he came up with this theory in 1953. Can you imagine how old he is today and how old he was back then? He was a very young man working on a PhD in economics at Chicago, and he came up with this theory. Back then, it was a new theory. Nobody had any idea about the theory until this came along. The idea is very simple. The question is, if you have a portfolio, if you have a group of stocks, right, or a group of securities, what happens to the standard deviation of your portfolio as you increase the number of stocks in your portfolio?
Goes down.
Right. So it should go down, but in what way? How does it go down? Does it go down like that?
Does it depend on the stocks?
Well, to some extent, yes. How does it go down?
I think it goes down for one and it levels out.
Right. Actually,
Yeah.
it should look like this. So the idea is, for the first 2 or 3 stocks that you add to your portfolio, you're going to see a very steep drop in the standard deviation for the first few stocks. But then as you add more and more stocks to the portfolio, the reduction, the marginal reduction is going to be smaller and smaller and smaller until eventually it's going to be flat. Right? It's going to be flat. So the idea is you should hold many stocks or many securities at the same time. That way you can reduce the risk of your portfolio. And that was the origin of the portfolio theory. Right? 1953. He got a Nobel Prize in economics because his idea was had a lot of applications. You can imagine the entire mutual fund industry is based on his idea. Does anyone know how much money is in the mutual fund industry? Trillions of dollars, yeah. And believe it or not, it came from this guy. It came from this guy. One person. Amazing. That's why he got a Nobel Prize. Ironically, when he proposed this idea to his advisor at Chicago, his advisor said, no, this is a bad idea. So he went to another professor, and another professor took him to, decided to take him as a student. But somebody didn't really, a lot of people did not see the benefit of this theory. All right, now when you look at this picture here, you can see that the total risk can be divided into 2 parts. The first part right here, at the top, this is what we call the diversifiable risk. Okay. Diversifiable risk, or unsystematic risk. Well, there's a picture here in your book on page 169, 170 actually. The top part is diversifiable risk, unsystematic risk, bug-specific risk, or there's a fancy description. This is what we call idiosyncratic risk. Okay. They have the same meaning, but just different expressions. have the same meaning there. On the other hand, if you look at the bottom part right here, this is what we call undiversifiable risk, or systematic risk, or market risk. Right. Again, they have the same meaning, but there are different expressions. Undiversifiable risk, systematic risk, and market risk. So the question is, what's the difference? What's the difference between diversifiable and undiversifiable risk? Yeah?
One you control and one you don't.
Yeah, which one do you control? Which one do you have some control over?
The diversifiable.
Yes, you can kind of manage this type of risk. But the second type, the systematic risk, you cannot eliminate, you cannot reduce systematic risk. Let me give you an example here. Let's say that if there's an announcement that there is a labor strike at GM, General Motors, what kind of risk would that event represent? Labor strike at a particular company? Okay, because
you can always invest in something else.
right, because it happens specific to only one company. See the word firm specific risk here? When you have something that's specific to one company, it's diversifiable because you may hold different stocks. And just because something happens to one stock or one company, you may have another company which may be doing well, and the entire portfolio is still okay. On the other hand, if the Federal Reserve announces an increase in interest rates, then what kind of risk would that be? It would be a market risk. Why is that?
Does it affect everything in the portfolio?
It affects every company in the economy, in your entire portfolio. Every company in your portfolio is affected by this event, right? So it would be considered systematic or market risk. So the idea is something that affects every company in the economy would be described as systematic or undiversifiable. Something that's specific to a single company, then it would be considered diversified. Can you give me a few more examples? Give me a few additional examples. Either systematic or unsystematic.
What's going on with Japan?
Okay.
Hurricane. Tsunami.
Right.
Yeah, that affects our Japanese market.
Right. For the Japanese market, that's systematic because every company in Japan now is having a hard time because of the natural disaster. Right. So in Japan, that would be considered systematic. Although if you from someone in the U.S., if you hold stock from different countries, it would be considered diversifiable because you may have some stock in another country which is not affected by the earthquake.
Usually when that happens, the entire stock market takes a hit because we're all interdependent.
That's true. To some extent, there is globalization, yes. But to some extent, not completely. All right, any more examples? Give me a few more.
How about the change in the dollar value?
Exchange rate, okay.
That would create a market. If you're looking at international markets, then you could say that you can now with international markets.
Right. For the U.S. dollar, I think it's true because universal. Everyone is, everyone uses the U.S. dollar. If it's a different currency, then it may not be systematic. But for the U.S. dollar, yes, I think you're right. Anything else?
Debt crisis.
Like sovereign? Yeah. That's a serious problem in the European Union. So that would be considered systematic it makes the European Union very unstable right now. Did you hear about Portugal? Portugal and Ireland also applied for financial assistance. All right, any questions about diversifiable, undiversifiable?
Can you just cover one more time just the basics of why that's the case with the standard deviation? So you're just saying that the variation, you have buffers built into the mortgage hardship 5, but as it goes to the right, the buffer relative difference doesn't make as big of a difference at first as it does for VA with more stocks.
Right.
Can you just go over that one more time? Like, what's the logic again to the right? Why the standard deviation drops off?
Oh, you mean the slope?
Yeah.
Why does it get flatter?
Yeah.
Well, you may need an equation to explain this. Because when you have a large, you can imagine, in the beginning you may have only 2 or 3 stocks in the portfolio.
Right.
When you add one more stock, the marginal impact is substantial because compared to the first 2 or 3 stocks, one more stock is a significant addition. On the other hand, if you have 40 stocks already and you add one more,
Right.
the impact would be
Relative to the other 39.
right. Relative to the other 39 would be much smaller. See, so that's the intuition. There's an equation if you can show this, but that's the intuition.